I was on the path to graduate high school early because I was so excited to get to college, to get into engineering. And then everything changed because I learned what was happening in abortion facilities. And my first thought was, why isn't anyone talking about this?
Okay, everybody, welcome to the show. Today I've got Kristan Hawkins. Kristan, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me today.
Could you tell us a little bit about Students for Life?
Yeah, Students for Life is the nation's largest pro-life youth organization, or the nation's largest grassroots organization. We are honored to serve more than 1,400 groups in high school and college and med and law school campuses across the country. We have presences in all 50 states. Our sister organization, Students for Life Action, is mobilizing young people at state capitals. So we're there on college campuses, high school campuses, where this generation's targeted by the abortion industry for their predatory business, having conversations. We'll have 1,000,000 conversations with Gen Z this year, change 10 to 20% of minds online and in person. And then we're also activating them to join us at the state capitals, helping us pass laws so we can actually achieve our vision in the pro-life movement, which is making abortion unthinkable as well as unavailable.
I was going to ask you, with a lot of states banning or limiting abortion, were there any states that, kind of doubled down and got more strict from that?
There absolutely have been. And we've seen that California, Gavin Newsom is basically running to be the abortion president of America. We've seen states like Minnesota. I was really heartbroken. We had engaged in a small way in the state legislative race. And I'm kicking myself because I feel like, had we been able to focus more attention in Minnesota, there was one vote that was changed, which determined the fate of one of their state chambers, which has allowed their PRO Act to now to be signed into law, which is essentially making Minnesota California. So absolutely, we've seen states double down.
It feels like every year we step into this issue, it's turned into more of a women's rights issue instead of a human rights issue. And so I've been wondering, just in your opinion, why do you think that we've kind of made that leap every year closer and closer to that argument? And how do we bring it back to human rights instead of just women's rights?
Yeah, I mean, abortion fundamentally pits the woman against the mother. The abortion movement does that the woman against the child. They always do that. And when we see in the Declaration of Independence, I know Kamala Harris, forgot, but there were 3 things that the Declaration of Independence said that we were endowed with by our Creator. By the way, we were endowed with our Creator. We weren't granted these rights by some document that some white dudes wrote on paper, right? They said we were endowed by our Creator. So she left out that part. But then a couple weeks ago, she also left out, she said, liberty in pursuit of happiness. No, 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 no. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Now, why did our founding fathers list those things in that order? Because that's the natural law. And this is what abortion does. Abortion pits a child's life versus the mother's liberty or the mother's pursuit of happiness. Now, we've seen this throughout our American history with every human rights atrocity that happens here or happens abroad. When we put someone's liberty or pursuit of happiness or profit over another person's right to life, or maybe their liberty, that's where you also, when you see these fundamental disorderings, that's where you will see humanity at its worst. So that's exactly what happens in abortion. Her liberty is put above another person's life. Don't have to look very far in our own collective history to think about the atrocity of slavery. When a slaveholder's pursuit of happiness, a profit, was put above someone else's right to liberty. Every time these rights get disordered, tragedy befalls us.
I think you're absolutely right. And that's a great way to put it. Just the reason life is there first is because, well, that's the main one. And that should come over the other two easily.
So you think about the abortion industry and what they tell women. They say, "I am woman, hear me roar. Women can do anything. They're powerful, except that we can't graduate college and also be pregnant. Except we can't advance in our careers and become a mother and have children." It's abortion is a distortion. It's the opposite of empowerment, and it's so sad because it's our movement, our standingwithyou.org initiative that our Students for Life groups are engaging in on campuses to promote free, nonviolent healthcare and resources, and changing the campus policies on campus to be more accommodating to pregnant and parenting students. That's not the pro-choice group on a college campus. That's the pro-life group, because we're fundamentally trying to change culture. We actually have a very progressive view of what our country should do. Abortion made our country, Roe versus Wade, particularly made our country lazy, because the solution is we don't have to figure out a way of how to accommodate women in the workplace. Where are we going to put their breast milk? Where are they going to, how are they going to take time off work? Can they do a flex schedule, working half the time in the office, half the time at home? We're not going to do any of that. We're just going to tell her, here, we're going to put abortion in our health insurance, or here, we have a scholarship fund here at our woke corporate headquarters, and we'll help you pay for your abortion. It's laziness. We actually haven't had to think about these things and how to transform our society. And so that's what's so sad when you hear this, like, women's rights tied up with abortion. It has, what about the woman in the womb? We never think about that. And what's really callous is the abortion lobby. So there's been laws introduced in Indiana and other states that specifically ban one type of abortion, and that is when the mother finds out the gender of her child. Because we know in some cultures, Asian cultures particularly, women are devalued. They have less value to a family than a man, because a woman leaves the family and the man stays and supports the parents. And so if you're poor, or your government is socialist or communist and tells you you can only have one child, what child are you going to have? For your own retirement security, you're going to have a boy. And so you see this epidemic of girl only abortions. So in the United States, some immigrants carry that culture to America and choose to abort girls. We have introduced in the pro-life movement legislation, particularly to ban gender abortions. Do you know who fights against that? The abortion lobby, the women's rights organizations, who are fighting to allow people to choose to kill babies because they're female.
I know this has not been a great administration for the pro-life movement. Has there been anything that maybe has kind of like skated past the public's eye that they've passed through there that's hurt the movement? I know they do a lot of things in Washington that we don't end up hearing about.
One of the things that most folks, we've sadly realized, don't understand what's happening is the weaponization of President Biden's DOJ and FDA. So earlier in January, the DOJ issued a letter stating that postal carriers can carry and deliver chemical abortion pills even into states where abortion is illegal, basically telling them you can skirt the law. Then the FDA, the next day, the FDA came out and said that pharmacies can now apply to distribute chemical abortion drugs. Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid have lined up with their woke CEOs to distribute these drugs. I want to be very clear. I'm not talking about Plan B. Plan B is a contraceptive. It's supposed to be used as a contraceptive. It's 11 times more powerful than the artificial hormones that are found in regular birth control. The intended use of Plan B is to stop an egg from being released from an ovary. Or we know in some cases it does cause an early abortion. But the intended effect is to be used as a contraceptive. It can cause an early abortion, but that's not the intended effect. What we're talking about here is entirely different. I'm talking about RU486, which is a cocktail of two drugs with the express purpose taken together to one, the first pill starves the developing human, so it stops giving the human food to grow. And then the second pill induces a contractions and expels child from the mother's uterus. The 100% goal of RU486 is to end the life of a child with a beating heart. Now, every pharmacy in America is allowed to give out those pills and become abortion facilities. This is a dramatic turn of events. It shows, I think, quite sadly, the power of why who we vote for matters, even now that Roe versus Wade has been reversed, because this is only being done because of the appointees that President Biden and the edict his administration has made on his FDA. These drugs lead to injury, infertility, and death for women, for mothers, and are also the drug of choice by abusers in our country because about a year ago, the Biden FDA said that these drugs don't even have to be administered after a doctor sees a patient. You know that whole mantra, abortions between a woman or a doctor, so shut up. And screamed at me before on campuses. That's not even a thing anymore because the Biden administration said that she doesn't even have to go to a doctor to even confirm she's pregnant or confirm that she's not being forced into having an abortion by an abuser, or that if she is pregnant, that she's not experiencing life-threatening ectopic pregnancy, which if she takes these drugs and she's experiencing life-threatening ectopic pregnancy, she can die because she's not getting the emergency medical care she deserves. This is a major issue. More than half of all abortions are being committed using chemical abortion pills. It will be, their goal is to see these pills to become 90% of abortions. They know that the majority of Americans don't like second and third trimester abortions. They don't like surgical abortions. Even the most woke people I know would not want to live in a neighborhood with an abortion facility. Why? Because even pro-choice people know that there's something icky about abortion. The normalization that the abortion industry, not only are they trying to see abortions increase with the distribution of these drugs by pharmacies, but they're trying to create a culture where abortion is normal, where you can go, because they're not going to stop with just saying pharmacies can distribute. The next edict from the FDA is going to be pharmacies must distribute, because if we all remember back in, 2012, 2011, when the Obama administration rammed through ACA, Obamacare, the Department of Health and Human Services labeled pregnancy a preventable disease. So that's how they forced every health insurance company in America to pay for contraceptive drugs and devices and insurance plans, because pregnancy is a disease cured by contraceptive drugs. Also, it's cured by abortion. So the next step will be forcing these pharmacies to distribute these life-ending drugs that have a 4-time higher complication rate and 10 times higher death rate than traditional surgical abortion, that will strip the religious conscience rights of any pharmacy tech worker or pharmacist in America. And then finally, their ultimate goal is that these drugs become over the counter in the next year heartburn medicine, where even sex predators and rapists can access them to cover up their crime.
Yeah, well, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, these are the drug of choice. If you are, so like right now in America, you can go to a website called planc.org. You don't even have to prove that you're a woman or that you have a uterus, because apparently now, people with uteruses don't have to be women. You don't even have to prove that you're pregnant. You can order these drugs and they will ship them to you via the mail. The Washington Post had a shocking expose. Caroline Ketchner had a shocking expose at the end of October. Not a pro-life source, not a pro-life writer by any means, going in depth to a Mexican drug cartel where a midwife in Mexico who doesn't speak English, only speaks broken English, emails with people from America who request chemical abortion drugs. She mails them the 2 pills and she mails them a tiny amount of acid, tells them when to take the pills, tells them now sit on the toilet or in the bathtub to abort your child. Before flushing your child, you can dissolve it in a tiny amount of acid and remind the women that not to be scared when it comes out looking like a baby. Meanwhile, for 22 years, we've been flushing these children down our toilets. So we actually have chemically tainted blood, pregnancy tissue, placental tissue, and human remains going into our open waterways when the EPA tells us not to flush a goldfish because it harms fish and aquatic life. Now we have active metabolites from these drugs being flushed into our water. This water that I'm drinking has pharmaceutical contaminants in it, and very likely could be drugs that can harm the reproduction of the fish and farm animals and even humans.
I got a kind of a personal question for you. I'm just curious what got you into the pro-life movement? What encouraged you to start doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I became active in the pro-life movement when I was 15. I was asked to volunteer at a pregnancy resource center. I was looking for a volunteer opportunity, and a woman at my church was an accountant in the pregnancy center, and that's really where my whole life changed. I wanted to work for NASA. I wanted a scholarship to advanced space camp in Hudson, Alabama. As a teenager, I wanted to major in aeronautical engineering. I was on the path to graduate high school early because I was so excited to get to college to get into engineering. And then everything changed because I learned what was happening in abortion facilities. And my first thought was, why isn't anyone talking about this? Why isn't anyone? I mean, my God, this is, at the time, it was over 3,000 children a day being aborted in our country. Yet I had gone to church my entire life and we never talked about it. My family watched the news, and every time my family would get together, they talk about current events, and no one was talking about this. Of like, why aren't there mass? I mean, think about that. You have today in America, we don't have a national abortion reporting law, so our numbers are always sort of loose. But we have a little over 2,000 abortions being committed every single day in America. 2,000. Okay, Planned Parenthood commits about half of those abortions. Um, if we saw the broken bodies of 2,000 babies lining the streets every night on Fox or CNN or even MSNBC, Americans would be demanding action. I mean, we would go to war with a country who came in and murdered 2,000 of our babies. Our country would be clamoring for war. There would be like American flags on every front porch in America. People say, go get those bastards that killed our babies. But we do it behind closed doors. Now we do it with a pill and we flush these babies down the toilet. And we say, well, that's okay. We use euphemisms like reproductive justice or women's rights because no one actually likes to say even the word abortion. Planned Parenthood doesn't even use the word pro-choice anymore because their own polling proves that pro-choice is too associated with the word abortion in people's minds, and they don't want people to talk about abortion.
What are some common questions you get from people who are not quite sure where they fall on that, and how would you maybe answer those questions?
The biggest question I get on campuses, and it doesn't matter, I used to get nervous about going to, an Ivy League school versus a state school, right? And the sad thing is the questions really don't change. There's about 10 questions that you get asked everywhere you go. And it doesn't matter where you go. I could be at Harvard, I could be at Berkeley, I could be at Ohio State. It's going to be the same questions. And the first question that always comes up, and you already brought this up, was, what about rape? It comes up every single school I visit, every single time. And I think um, it's important for us to answer the question with as much compassion as possible, because a lot of times when we're talking to people on especially college campus, statistically there's people in that audience who've been sexually assaulted, and the person who's asking may have been a survivor of sexual assault, or their roommate or their friend or their cousin. But I think it's actually a pretty disingenuous argument, because we try out the horror that a rape survivor endures, the very real possibility that they have to consider that they may become pregnant, unwillingly so, become a mother against their consent, to justify 100% of abortions, when in reality, abortions in cases of rape and sexual assault count for about 1.5% of all abortions. So the first thing I like to ask folks is, that's a, I mean, I can't think of anything worse that you could do to myself, my daughter, my loved ones, than sexual assault. And, let's set that issue aside for a second. We'll get back to it. But let's ask ourselves this question. You, the person asking me that, would you stand with me? Rape, incest, life of the mother account for about 3% of all abortions. Would you stand with me and say that 97% of the other abortions are wrong and they should be limited? I've never gotten one person to say that. And then I ask them, well, wait a minute. If you really believe that, so if you, there's nothing I can say to you that's going to change your mind, why are you bringing up rape, the exception to the rule, to justify 100% of all abortions? Why not just argue for why you really want to see abortions? Because I can 100% address why we should not discriminate based on a child's parentage, and how we've done that in the past in our collective world history with children who were conceived out of wedlock, for example, how we consider them bastards who couldn't advance in life and couldn't own property, right? We can address the philosophical reasons as to why fundamentally who your father is doesn't change that you yourself have value and who you will become and the good you will produce in our society. 100%. Let's talk about that. But let's get agreement though, and make sure you're not just trotting out the horror of a rape survivor in order to justify 100% of your extremist views of abortion. And that's exactly what they're doing. And it's despicable. It's absolutely despicable.
I was curious if, this is kind of a broad question. I know this is the hope, but if you feel like we're ever going to get to the point as a nation, whether that's, 10 years, 100 years, just the point that we look back and we see abortion and us as a nation go, that was horrific. The same way we look at slavery and go, that was horrific. The same way people would look at like the Holocaust or Mao's China and say, that was horrific. Do you think we'll ever get to the point that we look at that as a majority and say, that was an ugly part of our history and we'll never go back?
Absolutely, we will. We'll have a museum. It'll be similar to other museums attributed to times in our human history where we behaved in an inhuman manner and dehumanized a whole group of people simply because we didn't like them, or they were inconvenient to us, or they looked different than we did. We will absolutely get to that point. Because what we're seeing is this is a very much a progressive view, that we should be inclusive of people who are different than us, and what they hold in the abortion industry is a very much a regressive view of our society, the regressive view of women. And that's just not how it goes. And fundamentally, and I usually don't bring religion into the conversation, but honestly, I believe we will win because truth is light. And when you bring truth to the darkness, which is the killing of preborn human beings, darkness has no other choice but to flee the room. Light always wins. And so we had this amazing victory in seeing Roe versus Wade reversed, which, by the way, I've been saying we're going to see Roe versus Wade reversed since I launched Students for Life. That's the whole reason why we launched Students for Life, was to have a trained, mobilized army the moment Roe was reversed. The whole time, so the 16 years we were doing this, people didn't actually think it was possible. People who even supported my organization continue to tell me, I know you've been saying this, but I never thought I'd see this. I never thought I'd see Roe versus Wade reversed. We had this amazing upset that will change the course of our country. Now we've got the Biden administration throwing everything they can at us in terms of chemical abortion, trying to be the abortion president chief, but it's not going to work.
Yeah, well, I mean, I hope that's true. I would, I hope I see that museum in my lifetime. Um, I want to say again, thank you so much for coming on. I think you're doing the best work possible. I don't think there's a more important issue in this country than abortion right now. The genocide of millions of children. I don't think there's anything more pressing, more important than that. So just thank you for all you're doing, and thank you for coming on.